It's that time once again, opening up the Peacock and Williamson mailbag for week 16. Questions about Kirk Cousins and what that looks like now and in the future. Could Brock Purdy reset the quarterback market? And a lot more coming at you right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Those are the handles where most of the questions come from in our weekly mailbag segments. So hit us up there on Twitter or drop a question in the YouTube comments. Make sure you subscribe while you are there. Love the everydayers that join us all the time here on Peacock and Williamson. And welcome to the new listeners as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you are listening to this podcast. And today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So the benching of Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix in for the Atlanta Falcons. We talked a lot about it on yesterday's show, and it's the big topic of the week as we head into week 16. And not surprisingly, we got a lot of questions on it, and there's a lot of different angles to talk about this story. And as usual, it's kind of a quarterback-heavy mailbag because it's the most important position in sports, Matt, and a lot of people are wondering like how teams navigate this, and there's a lot of pitfalls and there's new pitfall. It blows me away, Matt. Every offseason, it's like, oh man, okay, the league's really chock full of quarterbacks suddenly.
Yeah.
32 teams feel good about where they're at quarterback, and some of them feel good about where they're at backup quarterback as well. There's like 35 to 40 starters in the NFL all of a sudden. Then you get to week 16 and they're like, well, there's 9 good quarterbacks.
Right. They're all going to the playoffs and we can't compete with them. And Mahomes going to win the Super Bowl again.
Yeah.
We need a new Mahomes. And right. I went Allen. I went Lamar, Yeah. Of course. And I'm sure a lot of it is, you line up every week and you go through 17 games and you end up with, even if your guy's healthy and you finish the season going, we had a quarterback advantage in 5 or 6 of those games, or even 7 or 8, and it's a tough way to live, as opposed to we had quarterback advantage in 13 of those games, and all of a sudden you have 10 wins under your belt, so yeah, and it's very volatile. I mean, Kirk Cousins is the best example ever. Like if we did this podcast 1 year ago, 365 days ago, we'd have been like, well, someone's getting a solid starter in Cousins,
right? Yeah,
and Rodgers, yeah.
And so that's where it's like, can you fault the Falcons? Because, everyone's surprised they went with Penix because like, oh, you just paid Kirk Cousins a whole lot of money. So obviously you're not going to, draft a quarterback here. You're going to go that route and then you're going to build the rest of your team, new regime and everything. And they said, no, we're going to double down. We're going to spend money and a first round pick on quarterback. But I started at the top by saying it's the most important position in sports. So can you fault the team for wanting to be as good as they can at this position and spending both draft picks and money on it? And all of a sudden it turns out it's a good thing they drafted that guy because the free agent signing turned out not to be great. And Brian's question is Kirk Cousins the worst free agent signing in history? And it's hard for me to say that a guy that you thought was pretty darn safe turns out to be such a bust for you, right? Because usually it's the opposite. Yeah. Wild, like this guy's raw. He turns out to be the bust. But it's Kirk Cousins, who I thought was one of the safer signings that you could have at the quarterback position. Obviously, the Achilles, the big factor there. And we saw with Rodgers as well. Probably a bad offseason if you're a player coming off an Achilles injury, by the way, because teams might be like, oh, God, we didn't like how that looked.
Yeah, whoever the next one is not happy with Rodgers and Cousins' development on the field. Exactly. Especially older quarterback coming off Achilles. Real quick, I want to go backwards just a second because I was critical of the Falcons when they made the Penix pick too. I'm like, you could take any defender you want. You could have Jared Verse. You could have whoever you wanted at the time, and you're acting like you're in it to win it in a bad division. So, I mean, that's revisionist history. That being said, everyone was critical of the Aaron Rodgers pick and the Jordan Love pick. And I think the Falcons wanted to go from Favre to Rodgers to Love. You know what I mean? Like that's pretty enviable if you can pull it off. And and now it's being pushed along much faster than originally anticipated. I would have to think about it. I mean, there have been some crazy spending sprees in free agency history. Washington comes to mind in particular. You and I were talking about that off the air. Like, remember the season they got like Hainsworth and Bruce Smith and Deion Sanders, and like they had all these future Hall of Fame type guys way past their prime. There's a lot of examples, but maybe the question that we could throw it out there and people could tweet back at us is there been a worse free agent quarterback signing? Signing, like I remember like Scott Mitchell, like he's Marino's backup. Now he's ready to go be the guy. Or Flynn with Seattle, and then they drafted Wilson the same year and he never got a chance. But,
that's a very similar situation actually. And
right.
Flynn didn't even get out of camp with a starting job.
Right. But the investments weren't as big. I mean, obviously money now is bigger, but even like percentage of cap for the day wasn't as big of an investment as the Cousins one.
And that's the thing, because quarterback money has exploded too.
Yeah.
And so it's like, wow, 20% of your cap now. And there's a lot of guaranteed money. I had to go back because I was like, it wasn't that big of a deal and that long, right? And there's a lot of guarantees, like all of guarantees. 2025 money, $27.5 million base salary guaranteed. He's got roster bonuses of $10 million in 2026 and 2027. It was a 4-year, $180 million contract in total, with $100 million of that in guarantees. So over half of the contract guarantees. Now, Watson's the worst move ever, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Trade, they had to sign him as well. So does that count as a signing? Because they had to also sign him, but he wasn't just a free agent acquisition. And I don't think there's been a free agent quarterback since Kirk Cousins last time. So quarterbacks never hit the market.
Darnold might be the next one, but he's not even as established as Cousins was when he left Washington. Like how many true starting quarterbacks actually hit the market in the last 10 years? I mean, not many. And again, that's like Scott Mitchell was Dan Marino's backup. Flynn was Favre, Rodgers backup. I mean, it's Hall of Fame guys you're just stuck behind.
And honestly, kudos to the Falcons, because they would be in a much worse spot if they didn't draft Penix. So
it's working out. Yeah, they would rather have Penix than Verse right now.
And they would not have the draft pick and not have the Penix would go number 1 right now, wouldn't he?
I think. I don't know enough about the upcoming class. I know we're going to talk about it, but if you told me right now you could have anyone in this class or Penix, I would take Penix.
Yeah. So
I'd take McCarthy. I'd take Nix.
The signing on its own doesn't look great just because quarterback money is so huge. And this is obviously one of the biggest contracts on $100 million in guarantees. We've never seen that before, even with whatever bad free agent signings we've seen in the past. Let us know, because I'm sure every team has that free agent, and every fan is like, "Oh, do you remember so and so? What were we doing there?" What was the quarterback for the Broncos? Peyton, not Peyton Manning.
Peyton Manning?
Other Peyton. Was there another? Who am I thinking of? The tall dude. He's like 6'7". Oh, why am I blanking on his name?
Oh, Osweiler. Brock Osweiler.
Osweiler. That was it. Yeah, Osweiler.
He went to the Texans signed him, right?
And they had to give up a pick just to get him off the books, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what his timeline was, because he was drafted by the Broncos, and then
signed the deal elsewhere. That's what it was. Okay,
that was a bad deal, and then it was such a bad deal. They're like, "We'll give you picks to take him off our hands." I think he went to the Browns after that.
Oh, Paxton Lynch was the name.
Paxton Lynch. That was just a terrible draft pick, right?
That was just a bad draft pick. That wasn't so it was Osweiler was the guy I was thinking of, though. Yeah, that was it.
I do believe that the Deshaun Watson move is the worst move in NFL history.
Yes, yeah, but not a free agent signing. So,
there's other off the field stuff. But
from another listener, Michael says, "Is Cousins a day 1 starter for a team in 2025, given the lack of options in the draft and free agency outside of Darnold?" First of all, Darnold's setting him up to actually make more money than I think we first thought, and every week it feels like his salary is going up, maybe, and we kind of talked about this yesterday when we got the news of the Kirk Cousins benching. I could see a team wanting him as a stopgap. It's that it's going to be hard, dead money wise and contract wise, with his guarantees, to figure out a fit there, because no team's going to want to pay that. And I don't think the Falcons are going to want to eat all of that either to facilitate a move for him to be on another team.
I think it'd have to get cut. And I also don't think there's any team that's just saying, "Yep, that's our starter. We're good." I don't think that you could do that at this point.
Right.
I think he's going to turn into Joe Flacco pretty quick.
Well, he'll probably end up in the same situation where he ends up on a team that also drafts a quarterback, right?
Mhm.
Like, the Raiders draft Shedeur Sanders and then also have Kirk Cousins as the guy to bridge that gap.
Yeah. Or maybe he's one of the guys just drafted's back, Caleb Williams back up, or something like that.
Next, speaking of quarterback money, it's an interesting report from Tom Pelissero that Brock Purdy might be looking to reset the quarterback market. Is Brock Purdy the elite level quarterback that could get over Dak money and leapfrog everybody an annual salary in the NFL? What about the first round quarterbacks in the draft? And on the line, we got to put our names on the line here after 15 weeks of football, Matt, who are our Super Bowl picks this year, heading into week 16. Next. Today's episode is sponsored by college football on TNT, and I'm super excited for this, getting more and more excited for the new 12-team format. Yep, it's that time of year. College football playoff is back. 12 teams now, guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love with college football. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into the first matchup, SMU, Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon Eastern. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. This episode is also brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time, it's our most precious commodity. So don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including history, economics, the great works of literature. Did you study these much? Have you studied them recently? Probably not. Even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever, tune in wherever, plus go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. So go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. Hillsdale.edu/lockedon. All right, I've talked about this a lot on Locked On 49ers this week as the 49ers season kind of came crashing down recently, and some focus has gone into the offseason. And Brock Purdy's going into the last year of his contract, and as a 7th-round pick, the last pick in the draft, number 262, he's not made a lot of money. He's making $900K, creeping up toward $1 million. He's not going to show up for that contract, Matt. And so there's going to be another negotiation. The 49ers have had some tough negotiations recently. And when you're talking about quarterback money, as we just mentioned with Kirk Cousins, it gets even more dicey with how much money's out there. And the Niners, had holdouts and went into the final minute with Brandon Ayuk and Nick Bosa recently. And that was over $1 million, $2 million a year. What if they're $10 million apart, $15 million apart in what the ask is versus the offer for quarterback money that is obviously skyrocketed recently? And so the question becomes, from Scott here, says, should the 49ers pay Brock around the same as Dak, or should they move on from him? I don't think he takes a hometown discount. And if you listen to the reports, Niners play-by-play radio guy Greg Papa kind of said something about around the same day and kind of in response to what Tom Pelissero's report was. So Tom Pelissero's report about Brock wanting to reset the market clearly came from an agent, right? And so
probably right
market. And Greg Papa is like, oh yeah, they'll try to work something out, something that makes sense for both sides, and it probably won't be quite $50 million a year. That's a huge difference. That's over $10 million per year difference if we're talking about going over the top of Dak's $60 million per year and paying him potentially 50 or less than $50 million per year. $50 million per year, Matt, is a whole lot of money. And if you start talking about a 5-year contract, and that's approaching $300 million and half guaranteed, right? So $150 million guaranteed, $300 million contract potentially for Brock Purdy this offseason. That's too much.
I was curious where you would be on it, but I can't give him Dak money.
It's it's pretty wild, the economics of the NFL, where a guy like Brock Purdy should in no way, shape, or form be quarterbacking a Super Bowl team and make $900,000. But
of course, right.
there's in no way, shape, or form should Brock Purdy also make $60 million.
Right. There's a pretty big gap there. Yeah.
Insane thing. And there's just no middle class at quarterback aside from Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. And that's Derek Carr, I think, is in kind of that range, in the $30 million, $30 to $40 million range. I think Derek Carr's $37 million a year, something like that. Mm-hmm. Now, Brock Purdy should make more than those guys. And their problem is Brock Purdy's agent looks at Tua's contract, and I think Tua is a really good comp for me for Brock Purdy. He makes $53 million per year. So
I would start there if I was his
agent. His agent takes $1 less than that, right? But I didn't like that contract either. So for me, that was too much. And so it's going to be too much for Brock as well. And I think Brock deserves a lot of money. And I think he deserves some back pay for how much he's been paid for what he's done already. But man, if the equation becomes on this side of the scale, you pay Brock Purdy $60 million a year, or on this side of the scale, somebody else is willing to trade for Brock Purdy and pay him and give you a draft pick, plus you can sign Sam Darnold for one of those middle-class contracts at $40 million per year, whatever it is, and you can spend the other $20 million on a player, which you can get a really good player at a really hard-to-find position to pay him. So you get a defensive lineman, a Sam Darnold, and a draft pick, or Brock Purdy for $60 million. That's an easy equation for me.
Me too.
I don't know if it's going to be that easy for the 49ers.
Purdy's definitely grown on me. I mean, I don't look at him like, he's super replaceable. He's a bum. Wherever he goes, he's going to fall on his face. I don't see it that way. But I was going to ask you, what would you do? I think I kind of just got the answer. And if you asked me that, I would say, here's the Baker Mayfield contract, which looks like a bargain for the Bucs as we speak. But he's going to say no. Right. I mean, it's going to be that simple. Right.
And I get a lot of those questions like, well, what wouldn't you offer him something? Like, yeah, that's what I would offer, but that's not what he's going to take. So this could be going to get it done. This could be really difficult. Like this might really be an August holdout again, right? Because I don't know that the 49ers are that willing. Here's my question. I'm going to ask this to you. I'm going to put it this way. So you put your GM hat on. Mm-hmm. Let's say the 49ers day one are like, hey, $45 million a year, and Brock's like $65 million a year. You know what I mean? It's like they're that far off. And so the 49ers say, look, we're way off. You're telling me market value is X? Okay. Because Tua got what he got. Tua got what he got because his team was afraid to not have him. That wasn't market value. That was what that one team was willing to pay.
Competing against themselves.
Right. And so market value, yes, there's these quarterbacks that are making this money. But is that really market value? So let's say, okay, agent, go find it. This is
go talk to the Titans and Jets and
February. Like for free agency haven't even started yet, right? You can't even bid on Sam Darnold yet. Okay, go find $60 million. Find a team that's willing to pay that. And if you're willing to pay a quarterback $60 million, you're willing to trade $60 million quarterback. You're trading 2 first-round picks. You know what I mean? Like, is that really what he wants? I have my doubts. Go find that agent and then come back to me. And the agent might say, hey, we got 51. And we're like, okay, let's work on something then. You know what I mean?
Okay. Now we're back on the table.
Comes back and says, hey, we got 2 first-round picks and $60 million. The 49ers might say, okay, we'll take the 2 first-round picks. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you can't go in with no.
I think it's more like 1 first, but
I don't think it would be. I don't think it'd be a first. I think they might get, hey, this team's willing to go close to 50 and here's a second-round pick. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's max of what a team would be able to give up.
I can't give the 8th pick in the draft and $60 million.
Right. Like the Giants aren't giving up the 2nd pick in the draft for Brock Purdy and paying him, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
Who's maybe the Titans or somebody?
I was like the Titans, the Jets, the teams that aren't, in the they need one but aren't in the top 2 or whatever.
And what I really hate about this conversation, I want to take up this whole podcast. You can go listen to the last couple of episodes of Locked On.
A lot of this goes into our next question too.
Yeah. What I hate about this is you have to like crush Brock Purdy in this conversation. Brock Purdy's awesome. He deserves hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Mm-hmm. He's just not that. If you're paying Brock Purdy as much or more than the Bills are paying Josh Allen, you're behind. and you
Right.
instantly are behind.
I mean, from what I understand, like baseball arbitration is nasty. Like, like he doesn't shower enough. I don't like the look of him. He smells whatever. I mean, it's just nasty, nasty lawyer stuff. And it kind of has to get that way. But that's what you say. Like you mentioned, Josh Allen. Like if Brock Purdy's worth 60, Allen's worth 100.
And that's exactly like
right.
Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are about to have new contracts. They're not going to see the end of their contracts at all. And their contracts have already been like, especially Mahomes, like they pull the lever every year on restructures. And I don't even know what his contract actually is anymore.
Right.
Based on the old $500 million contract that he signed.
Lamar and Burrow just signed new ones, and they're already undervalued if this is the market,
But the question is, what team has the guts to say, you know what, you should be a middle-class paid quarterback, and we're willing to open door B, right? Like what's behind door number 2? Because that's where teams haven't been willing. So they're like, well, you're up next, and this is what the other guy made, so this is what you get. And I wonder what team will say, this is crazy money for quarterbacks. We're not going to pay you 25% of our salary cap in annual salary.
See, I wonder, this is a much longer conversation, but I wonder if the NFL should do something like this. Here's an unbiased arbitrator, and there's 10 different quarterback salaries that exist on the planet right now. Arbitrator says, you're a tier 2 guy. You signed it or not, and there's no negotiations at that position. Right. Mayfield, you're a 3, Allen, you're a 1, Purdy, you're a 3. And if you guys can't, agree on that, then trade him and team X will pay him as the 3. Winston, you're an 8, and whatever it is,
That's why I think that you'd be kind of getting around that. You'd be like, okay, agent, you're telling me market value for Brock Purdy is $60 million.
Prove it.
Go find it. Prove it. Yeah. That's what I would do. I don't think that. I think what's going to happen is the 49ers are going to pay a whole lot of money because every team is afraid of what's behind door number 2 at quarterback. And if you have a guy that you Miami did, good, is exactly like, we're going to pay him.
That's what the Giants do with Daniel Jones. Right. Some of them work out, no doubt. But
it was bad, and we're at the time. Like I've been crushing the Giants for years, and where are we? We're back at ground zero again, right? At quarterback, and I think Purdy's better than that, right? But we're also talking about paying him twice as much as what Daniel Jones got. Like that's the thing is like you really like Brock Purdy, but Brock Purdy for 60 is a lot different. Like give me a dozen Brock Purdy's at $900,000. You know what I mean? Like that's awesome. Brock Purdy's a good player, and he deserves a lot of money. He deserves some back pay even for what he's made already. But I'm out on $60 million Brock Purdy, even though he might get it.
Yeah, I'll give it to Trent Williams and Bosa and Warner and take my chances at the quarterback position again.
Right. And I'm really interested to see what the Dolphins look like. It's interesting the Dolphins and Niners are playing this week, and we'll make that pick on Friday. I'm interested to look at what the post Tyreek Hill, because Tyreek Hill's going to be in his last year with the Dolphins next year. That's how the contract's worked out. When Tua's money is high and there's less talent around him, what's that going to look like, right?
And those two teams have some similar DNA too,
Right, similar DNA. Obviously, Mike McDaniel came from Kyle Shanahan, and so when you look at the Niners in 2026, okay, no McCaffrey, no Debo, no Trent Williams. What's that going to look like with a $60 million quarterback? So those are the questions I have when you look forward. You can figure it out next year under the cap, but we start getting into the thing, and you've got. And it's one thing to have like, oh, we signed a so-and-so at whatever position for a lot of money and structured it in a certain way. It's hard to structure away $150 million in guarantees.
So, like in The Simpsons, Count Chocula and Mr. Burns, and they all get together and like rule the whole planet behind the scenes. Like, I wonder if owners were listening to what we just said, would just laugh and be like, we have so much more money than any of you ever care about. $50 million means nothing, and the cap will go up $100 million in the next 3 years.
That's the thing. Like in 2026, the cap is going to be so big that whatever contract, it's 25% of the cap now is only 15% of the cap.
Right. Do you know what Otani's making? And
and the Niners are one of those teams. They're an international team. They got a huge fan base. I'm sure they make a lot of money. They're paying a lot of guys though too, and so it'll get pretty. That salary cap will get pretty tight for the 49ers. Interesting. And
a lot of this leads to our next question. So let's knock out a break, and then I want to talk about a couple teams that could be interesting here.
Let's do that. First round quarterbacks and Super Bowl picks next. Final segment of this episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And when we make our picks on our six-pack or on Fridays, we use the lines from FanDuel because they are America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL. You want to place live bets on the NBA, NHL, do that too. Every sport imaginable, but tons and tons of props. Every single week, specials, and my favorite, NFL draft props as well at FanDuel. So just visit FanDuel.com and join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Last one on quarterbacks here, Matt. Let's go to our listener, Michael, who says, who's the Super Bowl matchup? That's our next question. Let's go to, where is the question about first-round quarterbacks? We had a question about, this is from John. With potentially only 2 first-round quarterbacks in the draft and neither of them top 10, do you see a lot of movement in this draft early on? I know it's early to ask, but I'm not sure I wouldn't stick and get a stud lineman or a receiver. So this is a big question for, the Raiders and Giants fans out there too, who are drafting early. Are these quarterbacks worthy of those high picks? And if not, where do the quarterbacks start to fall in this draft?
So I went to Tankathon real quick just to kind of look at the current draft order, and those two have the top 2 picks. But then it goes New England, Jacksonville, Carolina, Tennessee, Cleveland, Jets. And I kind of think that team, I'm not going to say a dumb team, but a team I don't have a lot of faith in, namely Tennessee, Cleveland, Jets. Cleveland and Jets in particular, but maybe Tennessee, make a crazy offer to Vegas or the Giants or whoever ends up in the top 2. Like if Jacksonville ends up in the top 2 or New England or a team that has a quarterback. And I say that's dumb. I might pull that off the table when I really learn about this draft quarterbacks. But from what it looks like now, I would not make a Bryce Young multiple first DJ Moore type of trade to get to 1 if I'm at 8. You know what I mean? But I kind of bet somebody does. Especially if it's like the Jacksonville ends up in the top 2, or
and maybe as the process goes along, one really starts to stand out, and you start to feel like, man, yeah, you know what, we really like this guy. It only takes one team to really fall in love with a specific prospect, and knowing that they're not going to be able to get him where they're at. And the other question is there like the Myles Garrett guy that you're like, well, we're not,
doesn't look like it.
We're going to draft that guy because he's too good and he's a slam dunk at a premium,
or the Jamar Chase,
right? And so that factors into things too. It's like, well, we could take a pretty good.
Doesn't look like it.
Take a good, there's Travis Hunter, who's a really interesting player, corner / wide receiver. Could that be good enough to where it's like, look, he's the best player. He could be an all-pro receiver or an all-pro corner. He might be able to dabble at both for our football team. He might be a full-time corner, be able to dabble. He's too good, and we don't love the quarterback, so let's go there. And then you're talking about pick 2 and 3, and then maybe some movement, because then maybe the team at 3, say, doesn't need a quarterback, doesn't want a quarterback. So then that's where you get the trades. But I tend to think if these guys are legit prospects and we go through the process and they're good, they're going to go high, and they're all going to be gone in the first few picks, right? I just think that's the way it's going to go. But my argument is, and I don't want to spoil what my gift is for the Raiders and the Giants when we do our gift season, our Christmas special, where we give presents to every team in the NFL. You can make the argument that it's much more important for the Raiders to have a whole bunch of draft picks and build a foundation. Pop in a quarterback that maybe is not a true blue chipper.
And I want to tie those teams in with the Purdy conversation too. Like, if it does go down, like you said, like go tell Brock's agent, go test the waters. Maybe Tennessee, Cleveland, or the Jets. Well, Cleveland doesn't have the money, but maybe like Tennessee or the Jets says, we'll give you a first or something and $55 million.
After they've had their first draft meetings, and all of a sudden they get a call from Brock Purdy's agent, and they're like, oh man, you know what? We didn't like those quarterbacks either. We got enough cap space here to do something silly and really buy him away from the 49ers. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Or we're going to give Darnold more than he should. But I don't think Darnold's going to leave Minnesota.
Oh, you think Darnold's going to stay in Minnesota?
I'm leaning that way more and more. I think they might win a playoff game, and then how do you let them go? I mean, or at least you franchise them and listen to offers, or
that's the path, and that would be. I wonder, like, what handshake deals, what behind the scenes looks like there. I would be pissed if I was Sam Darnold and I got the tag slapped on me, right? Because
it's a pretty nice raise, though.
And the reason I think Sam Darnold won't sign in Minnesota is because they have the other quarterback plan. He wants to go somewhere where he is the guy for at least whatever 3 years. Like, he's earned that opportunity to go somewhere and feel good about where he's at and not look over his shoulder. I don't think even if Minnesota wanted to keep him, I don't know if he would, unless they trade away JJ McCarthy and they're like, well, look, we're going here. And I don't think that's going to happen either. So that's why I think the Cousins is set up pretty well to hit the market.
Could be.
But franchise tag is certainly possible, because the Vikings be like, well, you played too well. Sorry, bud. We're going to at least get a draft pick out of this if you go find that free agent contract.
That's going to be the most interesting storyline, of course. Who you got in the Super Bowl? I got Eagles, Bills.
Steelers, Niners.
Obviously. All right.
It's not going to be the Niners. I know that. Sorry, what'd you say?
I got Eagles, Bills. That Lions defense is just taking on too much water for me.
Yeah. It's tough. Can they have a month, right? Can they get healthier and be in a good place by mid-January? They can still beat a lot of teams, including playoff teams, even as banged up as they are. So I'm not out on the Lions. I love the way that the Eagles are playing. Minnesota, I mean, they're right there too.
I don't think Green Bay's bad. I think Tampa could knock a team off. Like, the NFC's rough.
I will say I'm going to stick with the Lions, though. I'm going to go.
Okay.
I'm going to go Lions, Chiefs, because of course it's going to be the Chiefs.
It probably will.
And the thing about the Bills, I would say the Bills. First of all, I just want to be a little throw two different teams out there than you, but the Bills defense has given up 80-something points the last 2 weeks. Like, when we see that Mahomes Allen showdown again, I don't know. I would still bet on Mahomes as long as he's healthy.
I definitely would throw Baltimore's name out there too. Still,
yeah, they have some weirdness on the defensive side of the ball. It seems like they figured out some of that as well. That's kind of it. It was like these teams are going through these ebbs and flows, and all the teams are like, well, probably the Eagles. You would say, like, okay, I feel the best about offense, defense, how everyone's playing right now.
Yeah, I don't adore their quarterback compared to Mahomes and Allen.
Right.
And
there's been times where the offense wasn't there, but right now it is. And the Lions, there was time where offense, defense was there. Right now the defense is like, oh no. Right now the Bills defense are like, oh no, what's going on? So I'm going to still say the Lions. If I had to bet, I'd say Lions Bills, because
I'm sure that's the odds-on favorite.
It's probably what the odds say. But
I would take the field if you said you could have Eagles, Bills, or everybody else. I'll take everybody else.
I think it's going to be real interesting. There's not a slam dunk team to me right now. I think there's going to be we're set up for some really good playoff games too, is what it is.
I think the NFC in particular. Yeah.
Can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks to all your questions. Get them in for next week at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Drop a question in the YouTube comments. Subscribe while you're there. Matt and I back Friday. Making picks for week 16 right here. Peacock and Williamson.